Hey there, this is Rocky from BusinessWritingTutorials.com, and welcome to the next installment on this mini-series on punctuation in business writing. In this lesson, we're going to look at semicolons and when to use them. And although semicolons sound a little bit intimidating, they're actually much easier to deal with than commas, because there are only two primary uses of semicolons. For the most part, there are a couple of very special uses. For example, semicolons are used to separate references in the same parenthetical citation in certain citation styles, such as APA. And there are a couple of other obscure uses, but we're not going to concentrate on that so much. We're going to look at the two fundamental uses that you do actually have to know in all situations. We'll look at a particular kind of list, and we'll also look at a special case of joining independent clauses. Let's jump right into lists. And the first question that should come to mind is what kind of lists, because can't we just use commas? And we do usually just use commas for our lists. It's often taught that semicolons are used in long or complex lists. It's not the most accurate way to describe it, although that is often correct. We use semicolons in lists that already have commas in the items. Let's take a look at an example. I like tacos, pizza, and hamburgers. A nice simple list. And in this case, we can just use commas. There's nothing out of the ordinary here. And of course, we include this final serial comma that we talked about in the comma video lesson. But let's say we want to add some kind of sublist or categories to this list. Let's say we make a little sublist of Mexican food that would require commas itself. I like tacos, fajitas, and enchiladas, pizza, and hamburgers. In this case, because we made a little category with its own list, we need to use the semicolons to show these categorical groupings. We could, of course, just make this one long list. I like tacos, fajitas, enchiladas. We would have to remove this word "and" here. Pizza and hamburgers, and we could use commas there throughout the entire list because there are no larger groupings. However, sometimes the categories create some extra context for our reader, or there's some reason that we want to do it. We could also move this sublist into the middle or in the final item, and the same situation would apply. We'd have to use the semicolons for the larger groupings and these internal commas here for our sublist. We could also make this a very complex list and have sublists for each category. For example, one for the Italian food, one for the American food, and one for the Mexican food. In this case, we can see the value of the semicolons a little more clearly, as the semicolons, if they were commas, it would be really difficult to look at this list and see how the information is chunked. Another example of how semicolons can be used in lists is when there's some sort of descriptive information within the items. So it's not necessarily that it's just a sublist, it's any situation where you already have internal commas. If you look at this sentence, it's a little tricky on the eyes at first, and although you would come to the correct meaning after a moment, we don't want to force our readers to stop and decipher our meaning, or even stop just because something's tricky on the eyes. In this case, we have a perfectly good solution. We can use our semicolons for our major groupings, and the commas are used to set off the descriptive information. The interdisciplinary team consisted of Joe, a biologist, Marlene, a Harvard-educated chemist, and Jack, a statistician. It's just another example of how we might run into items in a list that already have their own commas, so we would need the semicolons there. This is a pretty simple case, so let's jump into the next one, which is semicolons between clauses. And in the fourth lesson in the comma usage video, we looked at a situation where we had two independent clauses joined by a coordinated conjunction. Here we're going to look at the opposite, two independent clauses not joined by a coordinated conjunction. Let's put this in lay terms again. An independent clause is essentially a sentence that can stand on its own, a grammatically complete idea. And a coordinated conjunction is one of these 7 little words: and, but, or, so, yet, nor, or for. Well, in this case, we don't want to have one present. So we can reword this in lay terms. Basically, we're looking at situations where we're going to use a semicolon between two sentences not joined by one of these 7 words. Let's take a look. Using the example from the comma video series, we just tweak it slightly. I read a book, she listened to music. We have to look first and see if we have two independent clauses or two grammatically complete ideas. I read a book is complete, and she listened to music is also complete. we also have to check and make sure that we don't have a coordinated conjunction, because if we did, we would use a comma. In this case, we don't have one of these 7 little words. We have 2 complete thoughts that are joined together. So we can use a semicolon. If we look back at our other example from the previous lesson, we have 2 grammatically complete ideas, but because we have this coordinated conjunction, we have to use a comma. That's the only difference. So then you might ask yourself, well, why use a semicolon at all? Can't we just use a period? And the answer is yes. You can basically always use a period. In this case, we're using a semicolon to join these 2 grammatically complete ideas. So why would you use a semicolon? Well, in most cases, you can just use a period. And if you're not sure, you can just use a period. And you'll always be right. However, there are certain situations where a semicolon is a slightly better choice, and this requires a little bit of practice and feel. Basically, when you have 2 sentences that are very closely related, maybe each sentence makes only part of a larger point that you're trying to make, and they're really best used in combination, or they're so closely related, or they directly contrast each other. For example, if you have, let's take a look at this first example here. We have 2 parts of an idea, and they show a contrast to one another, so they're best used together. I was planning to write the paper early, however, I procrastinated until the last minute. So you could also replace this semicolon with a period and capitalize however. That would also be fine. You're not going to be incorrect. Again, it's a little bit of feel, and you have to decide when the 2 ideas are so closely related that you want to put them together in the same sentence. Another example would be sometimes when you have one of these sentence adverbs. I thought I wouldn't be able to go. Fortunately, my meeting was canceled. Again, is it necessary to use the semicolon? No. But do they go together well in the same sentence? Yes. So perhaps it would be better to use the semicolon here. This example I took from the Chicago Manual of Style, and I think it shows a little bit better how a semicolon is a better choice in some situations. She spent much of her free time immersed in the ocean. No mere water-resistant watch would do. If you could imagine this no mere water-resistant watch would do as its own sentence, it would seem a little bit disjointed. But if you put these 2 together, they each make part of a larger point, so they're used well together in combination. This is part of the feel of using the semicolon, and you have to practice a little bit. But again, we can look here and we have 2 independent ideas, and we don't have any of those 7 coordinating conjunctions here in the middle. If we did, for example, if we had the word and, we would have to use a comma. Okay, so that's pretty much it on semicolons. You can go back and review those slides. Also, a couple of resources here that I just found when I was searching on my own, which didn't take much searching. They were probably the first 2 hits, I think. But this one was kind of funny on the oatmeal.com, first time I saw this. And there were some pretty clear examples, I thought, of what we just went over in the lesson, and some funny graphics. So you could give that a shot. And also this one here from, looks like Wisconsin U. It's pretty clear. And of course you could always just search for semicolon usage, and you should get plenty of other examples if this video didn't clarify for you. As always, please feel free to review this as much as you like and contact me with any questions, and I'll be happy to help you out. Good luck with your writing.